Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would make a video and do something I haven't done in quite a while, and that's cover something that someone else did in a YouTube video. And most of you guys know, as I've been saying for a while, something I had said back in 2019, I'm not going to really watch YouTube fitness anymore. I'm not going to cover stuff in the community. I'm not going to care about it because largely I'm focused on reaching my goals, which are a 600 squat and a 700 deadlift up in my 40s. I'm about to turn 44 here in a couple months. So I'm reaching that point to where I'm concerned with my goals. I'm concerned with coaching my clients, my lifters, everything else. And to me, YouTube is more of a side thing. And I simply don't have time or the energy to care what any of these yahoos and people are doing. It just doesn't matter to me. But I had a pretty large number of people. And okay, that might be an exaggeration. Large number meaning I think like 7 people had said, Jason, hey, Boogs did this video. Will you check it out? Will you give your take on it? We know you don't care about this stuff anymore. So I watched it, and I noticed even in the comments, there were a lot of people trying to tell Eric that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And to me, that's fascinating, because in what world does anyone think that Bugenhagen doesn't know what he's talking about? Look at the guy's background, look at his accomplishments. I mean, realistically, when you compare someone like Eric to 95% of the influencers on any of these platforms, he knows more than they do. Look at his training background, his knowledge base, the things that he's done, the fact that he's actually been a legitimate strength and conditioning coach at the D1 level, okay? He's been at the D1 level of strength and conditioning coach. He's competed as an athlete at the D1 level. The guy is jacked. The guy is strong. The guy is athletic. So in what world does he not know what he's talking about? Okay, that's a ridiculous claim. Okay, I mean, just objectively speaking, to make such a statement's absurd. I mean, why wouldn't you go do that in everyone else's channels? There's plenty of people who clearly have no practical knowledge at all. They have no practical experience outside of whatever silly nonsense they came up with from bodybuilding magazines and doing their fluff and pump routines. None of them are strong. None of them are jacked. They're just skinny guys with a little bit of abs and a little bit of bicep. Okay? They can't perform. They can't do anything. So why don't people go to those channels and say the same thing? When they go and they're going to get onto someone like Boogs for making a statement of saying that for our purposes that single joint exercises are largely a waste of time. Okay, and that doesn't mean they're completely a waste of time. I mean, when you look at certain things, there's plenty of powerlifters who could benefit from a little bit of single joint stuff. Okay, what do I mean? For injury prevention, because you're just simply not going to get that big and strong off single joint exercises. You're not. You're not, and he's right when he says that. Hey, that shouldn't be a controversial statement. Outside of the bizarre fetish bodybuilding world, which hopefully no one watching this cares about. I hope that that's not something that you care about. I really do. But outside of that world, that's not even that controversial of a statement. But when I say that, hey, maybe single joint exercises have their place, I don't know, a lot of power lifters and other strength athletes might get less hamstring tears if they did a little bit of extra work for their hamstrings. Okay, there's something to that. Now, whether you choose to do that on a glute ham device or a leg curl or whatever, it's largely irrelevant. I know that's almost blasphemy to say. But the point is, maybe less hamstring tears. Maybe if some of these guys did a little bit of extra work for bicep tendons, might get less bicep tears. I've suffered one many, many years ago. I think it was 2004, so it's been 16, almost 17 years. These things do happen, though. They do happen. I don't know, a little bit of extra bicep work, particularly some stuff that works the tendons in a stretch position, or a little bit of band work. You know what? It might actually help prevent some bicep tears. Okay? So I'm not even saying, hey, these things are completely useless. But if our goal is to get really strong, which again requires us to be really jacked, as we know a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, a larger muscle has more potential for force production. And we care about force production. I don't care whether it's a maximum lift, to sprint as hard as possible, to jump as high as possible, to kick as hard as possible. Whatever it is that you're training for, yes, size plays a role, and it is important for us to maximize our muscle mass inside the context of maybe a weight class. Okay? But, aren't weight classes in most sports really height classes in disguise? They kind of are. Okay, they kind of are. But that's another topic completely. So Eric essentially came in and said, look, a lot of these things are a waste of time. And he's not saying curls are bad. He said, hey, if you look at a cheat curl, that's a tremendous exercise. And I agree. And he talks about, again, what a lot of people think of as smaller exercises are still a multi-joint movement. And that's what he's saying, that, hey, okay, if you really want to get your biceps bigger and stronger, maybe doing some chin-ups and some cheat curls wouldn't be a bad idea. In fact, the cheat curl is a good exercise. And I would agree. Go look at the EMG data. It's something I said yesterday in a video, or was it the day before? In one of my own training vlogs, I was messing with a little bit of cheat curls. There's pretty good EMG data on cheat curls. Okay? There's pretty good data. They don't remove load off the bicep. That's kind of a myth, that people have this idea that because you add extra muscles that you get less load on a muscle. No, cheat curls work the biceps extremely hard, especially the eccentric component. Now, people will say, but you have to control. No, you don't have to control an eccentric to get eccentric overload. That's, again, a bodybuilder myth that when you go look at the scientific literature doesn't match up. Okay, that's not actually true. The fact of the heavy eccentric at all, and you're having to catch the weight on the way down, if you're doing a cheat curl, causes an eccentric overload. And most of the research out there is controversial that they can't determine. If you were to go pull a dozen studies looking at the speed of eccentric reps, some studies show no difference in hypertrophy. Some studies show that really fast eccentric reps produce more hypertrophy, and some show that slightly slower, more controlled produce more hypertrophy. But we mean slightly slower, more controlled, it's about 1 second. Right? Every study that's looked at 1 second versus 4 seconds found that the 4 seconds did not produce extra muscle growth, ever. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but meaning it doesn't really matter as long as there is an eccentric. And people say, well, that's not an eccentric if it's dropping fast. Yeah, it is. Not an eccentric would be a cheat curl, then you turn loose and let it hit the floor and pick it up and drop it again. Dropping it on the floor would be no eccentric, okay? You're still having to catch the weight on the way down if you're holding on to it. Good exercise. He talked about, again, maybe doing some extensions that incorporate the long head. Now, I would argue for most pressing purposes, and I don't know, the long head's not that important, unless you're an overhead athlete. If you're going to do some overhead stuff, maybe it is a little more important. For someone who's just trying to bench press, probably not that big of a deal. But not everyone is just concerned about the bench press. A lot of people need an upward angle. And let's come over, let's talk about a boxer, an MMA fighter. How many of them are punching at a more upward angle? They're not punching down like this. If that's what we were doing, we could do a bunch of dips and be done with it. Which again, he pointed out the dips are a phenomenal tricep exercise, and they are. They are. They're great exercise. Weighted dip, get strong on weighted dips, your triceps will grow. Your triceps will get strong too. But we kind of come over to that point of, well, what about for an overhead type athlete? Someone who needs to punch upward. Someone who needs to push upward. Okay, what if you care about your strict press? What if you care about the push press? What if you compete in strongman? You compete in football where you've got to push someone at an upward angle. Well, that long head starts to matter a little more, doesn't it? Okay, so everything is really about specificity there. But the point being is that he was saying that the multi-joint movements, they put more tension on the muscles. And that matters. And we know, based upon the few studies that have looked at it, when strength was measured, we have found that usually when a multi-joint exercise versus a single joint exercise are utilized for similar levels of hypertrophy, because this has only been studied a little bit, what happens? The muscle does seem to get slightly stronger if that strength is created through a multi-joint exercise. Now, some people will say, well, maybe it's only for that multi-joint. No, it's when they go test it on a strict exercise locked into a machine also. If you build that same size from a larger exercise that incorporates two different joints, and a tricep extension and a curl can incorporate two different joints. And people need to understand even those muscles, biceps and triceps, are connected at two different joints. They have a function, right? There is shoulder extension and flexion involved in bicep and tricep movement as far as the actual muscle itself. Look at where the head's inserted and what they do. There's at least one head on each of those muscles that is, to a large extent, controlled by shoulder movement, not just elbow extension and flexion. So he's not wrong, guys. He does know what he's talking about here. I mean, from a scientific perspective, from an exercise economy perspective, he is right. And I think the thing that he kind of says, like, look, you could get a lot of size if you were to come in and do tons and tons of single joint exercises. You could do it, but it's going to be at the expense of way more time spent trying to gain the same amount of muscle. Number two, it is going to have potentially higher injury risk. And he's also right there. Pure single joint exercises, which people try to call isolation, there's no such thing. Again, bodybuilder term that doesn't exist in the real world, not measurable, not true, complete myth. There's no such thing as an isolation exercise. What they mean are strict single joint movements, which still work like 4 different muscles. You can't isolate a muscle. You can put more emphasis on a certain muscle. But as he kind of said there too, you also can accrue overuse injuries a lot quicker. You can accrue overuse injuries a lot quicker just because you're hitting that same movement pattern repeatedly into a locked type position. That does create tendon inflammation. That does cause tendinitis. That can contribute to actual muscle tears and injuries. And I agree with that. Again, unless they're used very sparingly, it does cause that. And if, again, you don't believe that, go look how many bodybuilders are jacked up and have jacked up joints and tendon pain and have to wrap everything else and take painkillers and everything else, and they're not even lifting heavy weight half the time. Perspective, people. So I feel like Boogs caught a lot of flack for making this video, and a lot of people wanted to argue and disagree, but the reality is everything that he said in the video is both from a strength and conditioning anecdote observation point true, and if you go look deeper into all the scientific literature, it's all pretty much backed by the evidence. Nothing that he said in this video should be considered controversial. It really isn't. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.